Welcome back, dear readers, to Monster Mash by FredMSlonkier. Tonight's tale, we present to you a story of Rarity meeting up with a nasty bloodsucker and the wrongful cases that happen within. In tonight's story, Blood and Water. Enjoy. Ponyville was silent tonight, as it was almost every night, though some ponies were still looking up at the stars, reading a favorite book, or trying to get important work done before the morrow. As a whole, the little ponies preferred to be in bed before midnight, which suited Count Drac perfectly. The stallion moved through the night like a shadow, his deep red coat and silver mane strangely hidden in the darkness. By his side, another earth pony moved, some commoner who tarried too long in the marketplace. He had been simplicity itself to transfix with a gaze, and now he would serve the most important and last duty of his life, a first meal for Drac's chosen bride. Drac's eyes saw better at night than they did in the day, easily picking out his target, the Ponyfield Cemetery. It was a small plot, for Ponyfield was a happy place, seldom visited by the specter of death, and ill-filling his treasure. Indeed, the entire town was entirely too provincial for his tastes, in more than one sense. No matter. Once his business was concluded, he and she would be too far away from here, in much more fertile hunting grounds. As he approached the grave in question, his sensitive ears could already hear the sounds of hooves scrabbling, supernatural strength tearing apart oak like paper. The ground sank as dirt filled the coffin, sifted as the form beneath pushed through it as easily as water, surfacing at last to gaze on the world with hungry eyes. As he pulled the rest of her body free from the earth, he took a moment just to marvel at her transformation. She was perfect, just as he hoped. Even with the earth of the grave dusting her coat, her body was flawlessly radiant, shining like a jewel under the moonlit sky. Her violet mane, though disheveled and dirty, still managed to look better than any of the yokels she had been wasting her beauty on in Ponyville. And her eyes, blazing with hunger, yet still as gorgeous when he first saw her. A stallion could die happy looking into those eyes. Speaking of, she swiftly spotted his offering. Without a sound, she pounced, bearing the local to the ground, sinking her teeth into his broad neck. He whinnied as soon as Drac's hold broke, then fell silent as her own power washed over him. It was intoxicating to watch. A pony cried, "Now!" and night turned into day. Roaring as the light of the sun reached over the mountains impossibly early, Drac looked around blindly for a moment, then turned to focus at the source of the voice. From behind a pile of stacked wood, a lavender unicorn emerged, gazing defiantly at him, her body tense with anger. His powers were greatly diminished during the day, but nonetheless, he tried to grip her mind with his own eyes, only to slide uselessly as he glimpsed the object as he levitated before her. Seriously? A framed portrait of Celestia was wholly simple. He turned to run, only to be confronted by another pony. This one, an orange pony draped in long strands of garlic. She was watching him without meeting his gaze, lasso already spinning, no doubt to pin him while the other struck. Two Pegasi emerged to block the sky, not that he could reach it under this accursed light. One pushing a rain cloud that sparkled in a way he didn't like the look of, the other meeting his gaze with one that forced him to turn away. Backing up, he stumbled against the grave, finding his bride and her feet still locked together, ignorant of the danger. "Back!" he shouted. "Back, all of you, if you want your friend to survive the night!" He saw them stop advancing, and permitted himself to preen. The situation was dangerous, yes, but he still might escape, returning to the relative safety of... He never even saw the pink pony burst from the grave behind him, holding a wooden stake and a possibly large mallet. He merely felt a sharp pain as the stake burst through his chest. "Oh, thus," was all he had time to say before he burned to ash. The assembled ponies, and one another, glanced swiftly at the grave. Albizak pulling a dazed Macintosh equally from confused Rarity. "Thank you, Princess Celestia," Twilight said, looking with soft relief on her face. I don't know if we could have done it without you. You're welcome, my faithful student, Princess Celestia replied, her body relaxing as the sun reversed its motion and sank below the horizon again. You know that I am here for you and all your friends, especially against such a vile creature. She stepped up to the pile of ash and kicked it, dispersing it further with a swift flutter of her wings. I wish I believed you sooner, Twilight added, looking at Pinkie, and very carefully, not thinking of the pony jumped out of Rarity's grave. Maybe we could have avoided all this.
It's okay, Twilight, Pinkie said, teary as usual. I gotta practice my sticky technique. Grrr, whack!
She dove her stick into thin air demonstratively. I knew that pony was no good the moment I saw him! Applejack spit, looking up from Big Magatos, having satisfied herself that her brother would live through the experience. It weakened. I never thought he'd be an actual bloodsucker, though. Why had you had to get involved? Lazarus directed at Big Mac, who was still too out of it to answer.
I'm just glad this is all over,
Fluttershy muttered. It was clouds in front of her in the air, while Rainbow Dash tried to figure out the proper way to dispose of a rain cloud blessed by Celestia herself.
I do hate to interrupt.
All eyes turned to Rarity, who managed to regain her composure as much as possible under the circumstances. Running her tongue over her teeth wasn't the most elegant of gestures, but it served to illustrate her point, or rather, points.
But it seems you have all neglected a small detail.
Ah, correct, I said, speaking for all assembled. Rarity's welcome back party was much better received than her funeral. Pinkie Pie, oddly enough, planned both, and even reused some of the decorations. Black balloons dangled everywhere, along with black streamers, black frosted cupcakes, and black punch. Pinkie Pie insisted it was made from a secret blend of fruit juices, but Applejack had spilled some on the tablecloth and found the powdered bleach when she mopped it up. She was quietly staying away from the punch. The only decoration that wasn't in some way black was a big white and purple banner that said, "Not quite dead yet!" in slightly but legible letters. Rarity, naturally, was the focus of conversation. In an elegant evening gown, which she made herself equally naturally, she entertained the attention of well-wishers, answered the questions of the curious about the experience, and treated her own availability with humorous grace.
I don't know what I was thinking, she said to another pony. I mean, Count Tulloch. The way he always insisted on meeting at night. That cape. Oh, I should have known better, but I suppose it was the allure of it all. That old-fashioned charm. And it could have turned out much worse, all things considered. Hi,
Pinkie Pie said, albeit nicer.
More punch?
Rarity looked down at her glass. Shaped differently than every other cup at the party, and filled with a deep red fluid.
Then again, it could have turned out much better.
She sipped ruefully at the beverage, which was at least tolerably warm.
No, thank you, dear. Okay, you just let me know, Piggy said, heading out to mingle. There's plenty more where that came from.
Very carefully, not thinking about that, Rarity returned her attention to guests, only to be interrupted again, this time by Twilight Sparkle.
Hey, Rarity. Princess Celestia said the only thing she could do for you is put you to rest. But she's going to have everything that night and help me to cure sent over as soon as possible. I'm sorry the whole killing the siren vampire thing didn't work out.
She visited nervously. Rarity put a smile on to reassure her.
It's quite all right, Twilight, she replied. Without your efforts, I'm afraid Count Tulloch and I would be swept into the alleys of Manhattan, looking like vultures and hunting who knows how many other ponies. You've done your very best.
Twilight didn't look entirely reassured.
Well, I promise to keep doing my best until you're back to normal, she said.
Rarity inclined her head slowly. Twilight mixed back into the crowd, only to be replaced by Spike. Rarity, I just want you to know, if there's anything you need, just... He began, only to be levitated into the air by Twilight. What? Hey, Twilight! I wasn't gonna let her suck my blood! Well, okay, maybe just a little, but Twilight! Rarity watched as the baby dragon was dragged backward to the crowd, then sobbed silently. So, what's it like? Rainbow Dash wondered, avoiding the assembled ponies by the simple expedient of hovering above them, dropping into place.
Well, my senses are sharper, Rarity replied, at night at least. I feel stronger and faster, and my magic is more delicate than ever before. I've been having trouble staying up during the day, though. While I can eat, it doesn't satisfy.
She looked at her punch again. The glass held in magic that glowed deeper, red and violet than she was used to. And she took another sip.
Now I've had to recoordinate my entire wardrobe, she lamented. Violet is hard enough to work with, but violet in red?
Her eyes lacked the glow of her first hunger, but they were still blood red, and her cutie mark had darkened and reddened as well. And I just want to say, I had plans to do this story way before the recent comic book issue. Really! I so totally did not intend this. At least her coat was as pale and perfect, and her mane was, if anything, more lustrous than before.
Don't forget Angel Bunny,
Fluttershy said, and we somehow found a gap in the crowd to walk into. Rarity sighed.
How can I forget? That little monster, the poor thing was driven into a rage at the very sight of me,
Rarity said, and similarly touching her face with a hoof. Oh, that's just Angel on a normal day. The scratches had healed, but the memory lingered.
I don't think I'm going to be sitting for your animals anytime soon.
At least Winona still likes you, Applejack interjected, taking the spot Rainbow Dash had vacated as soon as Rarity started talking fashion. Rarity didn't quite have the heart to tell her that Winona had been just as vicious as Angel until she stared the dog down. And since then, Winona had been almost embarrassingly glad to see her. She suspected she used some power over animals by accident. Speaking of acting strange, Big Macintosh had come up beside his sister, and the look he was giving her was a touch more intense than she was used to getting from the seldom-spoken stallion. "Are you feeling all right, Miss Rarity?" he said.
Yes, of course, she said, tipping her head slightly. I should be asking that of you, I think.
"I'm fine," he replied, reaching up to absently rub at the mark on the side of his neck. She hadn't been exactly grateful on their first feeding, but the wound had healed up a lot better than it had any right to. "Big pony like me gets lots of blood. You don't need to worry none. I know you didn't mean anything by it."
Rarity nodded. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
She turned to one of the other partygoers, but Big Macintosh's gaze never left her, as he was drawn back.
Is there something else?
Big Macintosh visited. No, ma'am, he said, but didn't look away. Rarity raised an eyebrow.
Really? All right, then,
she said, turning after a moment, walking away herself. She could feel his eyes on her as she lost herself in the crowd. Rarity's awakening felt like a switch had been flipped. 1 second, she was off. The next, she was on, lifting her head from the table and looking about confusedly. Only when she looked out the window and saw the faint glow of the dust-set sun did she realize what had happened.
I slept again,
she groaned, hitting the table with both paws. At first she assumed that, as long as she turned in early, she'd get her sleep schedule back to normal. Then, when that proved impossible, she tried staying out late to wear herself out. Neither worked. She could be awake during the day, even if she felt somewhat lessened, but she couldn't seem to stay awake more than a few hours before falling nearly comatose, only the disappearance of Celestia's sun releasing her.
This can't go on,
she said, sliding into a standing position and beginning to pace. Opalescence, who had been entirely different to her translation, stretched briefly, then dozed back off as she passed.
The whole point of having a boutique is that nothing is off the rack. I need to measure customers, spend time with them, discern the inner beauty that my designs can bring to life.
She glanced out the window again.
Maybe I can switch to night hours. No, that will never work. I must have some pony around during the day. An assistant? But who can I possibly get? Who else in Ponyville knows anything about...
I have an idea, Rarity. You should go to Manhattan. There's this sweet, adorable, innocent little Earth Pony mare who is right now under the hoof of an evil mare. What I want you to do is go in and make her your slave.
What?
Oh, don't worry, Coco, you'll love it.
I don't think I would. Just me, Coco!
As she finished the sentence, Rarity trailed to a halt.
Sewing.
After a moment, she started pacing again.
But that would never do. Rarity can't handle the demands of working with the public. At some point, want to be too loud, or worse, criticize her. Not to mention, she never leave her animals unattended.
She shot around suddenly.
Oh, but they simply must! She's the only pony with only half my talent. She can take measurements, and I can do design work at night. I miss seeing the finished effect. No, they can come by at sunset for the final fitting. Yes, that will work nicely. If only I could convince her. She paused again, thinking about it carefully. Maybe I could get someone else to watch over her animals during the afternoon. But who? I need someone dependable, someone she can trust, someone good with animals, someone who owes me a favor. The sound of footsteps disrupted her train of thought. Now, who could that be? She wondered, heading out the back room and putting her best face forward. Work at the carousel boutique. Well, Big Macintosh. It was quite possibly the last pony she expected to see here, just behind Rainbow Dash. But there he was, standing just inside the doorway. Yup, he replied, once more his taciturn self. Rarity raised an eyebrow. Well, not that you ought to welcome here, darling, but what brings you by? She asked. Oddly, he didn't answer, just shuffling his hooves. She cast about for the reason he might be silent. You needn't worry if it's anything embarrassing. I can keep matters in the strictest of confidence. Still nothing. Bing Macintosh, I'm not a mind reader. Are you here to pick something up? I don't believe Applejack has placed any. Reggie trailed off, as if deafened by silence. She could feel her temper growing. She was upset with herself at once again, having to fail to keep the shop open, and she was hungry to boot. As Twilight had insisted she stay on a minimal diet, while the studious unicorn tried different spells and potions over the last few days, in an unsuccessful attempt to rid her of her curse. Big Macintosh, look at me! She demanded, and the surprised stallion met her gaze. I demand you tell me what this is about, this instant!
Well, I've been thinking about when we were in the graveyard, and you bit me,
he said, his voice own, yet somehow distant.
It hurt at first, but then it started feeling really good. I know you've been getting blood from Pinkie-Pie, but I reckon it ain't the same. So I thought maybe if I hung around.
Rarity was shocked for multiple reasons. One was that she had a strong suspicion she knew what she had just done. Her novels had been far from silent on the compelling gaze of the vampire. And while Twilight's research had been focused on some way to undo the change without killing Rarity, she alluded to unique magical powers in the middle of one of her sessions. The other was that Big Macintosh was right. She could still enjoy a fine grape juice or delicate biscuit, but it didn't satisfy her hunger. The blood that Pinkie-Pie delivered from somewhere or other, she never actually got into details, filled her belly, but it had a horrid chemical taste, and she could only get it lukewarm at best. Add that to her starvation and Twilight's hose, and she ran her tongue over her lips absently. Big Macintosh seemed mesmerized by the sight. It would be so easy to. Are you guys glad I didn't do a cupcakes reference? See, that's the high quality of jokes that you expect for this show. No. She closed her eyes. She shook her head and heard him stumble a half step, but the thought remained. Big Macintosh, she said carefully, you're the only saying that because I'm influencing you. It wouldn't be proper. I won't. I can't ask that of you. The boutique was quiet again for a long moment. The only sound of Rarity's mind, the argument between selflessness and hunger. Then the stallion spoke again.
You're right. You did do something to me, I'll think. But you're hurting right now, and, well, it just don't sit right with me, leaving you like that. You could do it without, anything permanent, can't you?
Rarity had Twilight Sparkle had very carefully measured her intake, as he'd seen a chart in Twilight's notes. The rate at which different ponies naturally replaced their blood. She didn't need much. A big, healthy stallion like Big Mac. Are you sure about this? She asked. Silence answered her. It occurred to her that if he said no at this point, it would be very difficult to let him leave. She had to be strong, though, no matter how much it hurt. She couldn't be the element of generosity if she were so greedily snatched that.
Yup.
She wasn't sure she heard him correctly, but she risked opening her eyes, looking at him sideways as to not risk doing what she had done again. He looked nervous, even hesitant, but he took a step forward anyway. Then, she said, not sure what else to say, I suppose you'd better come in then. And so he did. They had to tell Applejack, of course. They worked out the plan afterward, while he rested and she piled him with tea, feeling shame at her weakness, yet feeling alive in a way she hadn't since the dreadful night. In the afternoon, Big Macintosh would set off from the farm to Firesides, and she would in turn come to the boutique, taking measurements and careful notes on the customer's desires. She would be careful to convince, but Rarity was certain that, in the end, Fireside would be unable to deny her need,
and she would make it quite plain that any pony who gave Fluttershy the least bit of trouble would have to answer to her. Then Rarity could spend the evening designing and tailoring, able to relax and enjoy herself for the first time in weeks. No plan ever survived first contact with the enemy. Applejack had been furious, both at Rarity and at Big Macintosh, when Rarity told her what the two had done. She had only been more upset when Winona had taken Rarity's side, barking and growling at the Earth Pony when she had threatened to run Rarity off the farm. Add to that, Big Macintosh asking to take time from farming to help Rarity, and the sometimes bristly Earth Pony had nearly forgotten Violet with both of them. Rarity could understand her concerns, but it hurt all the same. It didn't help to hear it all again from Twilight when she got back to Ponyville at the break of dawn, already beginning to feel the effects of the sun. At least Twilight had been easier to deal with. The studious Alicorn felt too bad about her own failure to find a solution to dig too deeply into Rarity's hide, and at any rate, her connection to the situation wasn't so nearly intimate. She had also been intrigued by Rarity's confirmation of at least part of the lore she had been studying, and shifted her focus from finding a cure to determining the extent of Rarity's powers and limits. This was why Rarity was, at the moment, sitting in Twilight Sparkle's basement, enduring various indignities. She answered several questions, more or less, automatically over the past few weeks. Yes, she still had a reflection in shadow. No, she didn't perform protests while preparing to feed. Yes, the day weakened her, but no, she didn't go up in a bonfire in direct sunlight. Twilight had many more questions where those came from, though. She had silver pressed against her skin. No effect. Force-fed garlic. Vomiting. No lingering damage. Holy symbols weighted against her. Effective, but only when Twilight was actively using them to hold her at bay. They didn't seem to work for any other pony. Had been tested against running water, entering private residences, and even having rice flung at her feet. No effect, except an annoyed Twilight and an apologetic Pinkie Pie. In return, her senses, at least at night, had become incredibly keen. She could hear tiny sounds without everything around her seeming like a roar. Even the faintest speck of light was enough for her to read easily. She looked at an entire bank of delicate measuring equipment, without even breaking a sweat, and snatched some bit off the table before Twilight saw her move. She also known her magic, and gained a new, more delicate touch. But how delicate she hadn't realized, until she scratched her name with a copper plate in writing so small, Twilight needed a magnifying glass to read it. Twilight removed the hoof cuffs from Rarity's forelegs. Had those really been necessary to study her horn? Twilight said,
Well, I can't think of anything else to test tonight. Ah.
Twilight stifled a yawn. We can look at the transformations tomorrow.
Transformations?
Rarity wondered, tilting her head said so.
You mean turning into a wolf or a bat or some dreadful thing?
Twilight shrugged.
You never know. You might need it someday. Besides, I thought you'd be interested in another chance to fly.
Rarity pondered that as she made her way out of the lab and library. Flaring in the sky in the form of some leather-winged rodent was hardly the majestic ascent she'd been capable of in Cloudsdale. On the other hoof, that hubris had been a quite literal fall from grace, and she hadn't even considered casting the spell again. This would be a more modest way to take to the skies, and there was a certain appeal to the idea. She couldn't just wing off willy-nilly, though. She had work to do, work she had been putting off to deal with Twilight's investigations. By the time she had finished with everything that needed doing, it was only an hour until dawn. She briefly considered waiting until the next night, but the idea had been gnawing at the back of her head for hours. She could at least test it. Yes, a quick loop around Ponyville, then straight back to the shop to rest. She stepped out into the street in front of her shop, looked around, pondering exactly how vampires went about transforming, presuming that it wasn't an old mare's tail in the first place. Did she need to think batty thoughts? Was it a spell she could cast? Would jumping off of something give her an extra motivation, or just lead to an undignified flop on the ground? She closed her eyes, attempting to meditate, and simply willed flight to happen. After a moment, she felt an odd rush of energy inside her. Could this be it? She struggled to hold herself in that state, to let the energy flow. Then, the world turned into a blur of motion and sound. She was flying, she vaguely realized, flying incredibly quickly, but she couldn't tell where. Her vision was blurred, images doubling, despite her best efforts, colors and angles weird. Sounds pulsed at her head from all directions. Was he carrying it out and only made worse, echoes seeming to rub against her as if she were actually hitting what they were echoing off of. Her body was all wrong. As he tried to think too hard about it, she completely lost control. But she didn't think about it. She was only giving suggestions anyway. She wondered vaguely if bats could vomit. Fluttershy would know. Oddly enough, she could see something that resembled Fluttershy's cottage now, but she couldn't possibly drive far quite. "Never again!" Rarity snarled, stalking back into Carousel Boutique. She learned several important lessons that day, she reflected. 1. A vampire constitution was insufficient protection against ramming into the side of a building at Rainbow Dash's average cruising speed. 2. The break of day did not mean she was forced into her natural form, but that she was trapped in whatever form she had taken until sunset. 3. Fluttershy really did have an uncanny knack for understanding animal communication, even if it meant that in question wasn't technically an animal at all. 4. That wouldn't stop Fluttershy from pampering her like any other insect animal for the entire morning. Angel's smugness had been palpable. For once, she had been glad to doze off only part way through the day. She learned something else important when she awoke that evening, when Big Macintosh had taken over for Fluttershy right on cue. Flying took a light out of her, and the hunger that gnawed at her all day roared to life, driving her to take him by the throat before he was even aware he changed back. When she had been able to release him, she had been horrified at his assaults. He was pale and cold, and she feared he might pass out, or worse. In desperation, she brought her hoof to her mouth and drawn her teeth across her forelock, and cut herself badly, pressing the hoof to Big Macintosh's lips, forcing him to drink. The results were as immediate as they were gratifying. While he remained worryingly pale, drinking her blood swiftly returned his strength. He looked almost normal by the time he finished. She slumped on her bed, eyes closing and sighing. So far, being a vampire had entirely failed to live up to the romance and glamour she had been promised. She missed being out and about in Ponyville during the day, listening to gossip or being roped into some adventure with her friends. She missed spending time with Sweet Belle, who she only now saw awake for an hour or so in the morning and a few hours at night. She even missed Applejack. They had never been close friends, precisely, but there was something about their friendship, something she was hard-pressed to define, that was important to her, and she felt its absence keenly. A gentle nuzzle drove her from her sleep penny, and she looked puzzlingly at Big Mac. She hadn't even realized he had followed her home.
Is there, is there anything I could do to make you feel better? Anything at all?
He let the statement hang, looking at her with the same dumb happiness she most recently seen in Winona's eyes. She couldn't cope. She groaned. She slid her forelegs over her head, prayed she'd wake up, and this would all be a horrible nightmare. She hadn't woken up yet. Applejack had been even more furious, at Rarity and at Big Mac, when she found out what had happened. She told her brother into no certain terms that Rarity was not welcome near her, the farm, any of her clan, and that the only reason she wasn't kicking him out as well as that he was family. Then she threw her hose around him and cried herself sick. Her other friends had been making an effort to make things easier for her, despite her reservations. Fluttershy had been looking after Sweetie Belle in the afternoon, after school, in addition to her duties as the Carousel Boutique's assistant manager. Again, there's this mare over at Canterlot named Sassy Saddles. Rainbow Dash would stop in by sometimes in the evening to share news of the day, inevitably centered on her own exploits, but it was better than nothing. Pinkie Pie had come up with something she called a personal portable party package, which seemed to involve coming over, redecorating Rarity's bed with gaudy colors, sending out a tray of nocturnal-themed snacks, and talking her ear off in a rambling stream of consciousness sensing. Only Twilight Sparkle declined to visit her, instead extending an open invitation to visit her at the library, stargazing, or reading, or whatever you like. Rarity had taken her up on an offer a few times, but it had proven awkward. Twilight's increasing frustration and her inability to keep her promise kept distracting her. She would inevitably wind up with her nose in yet another esoteric tome, searching for an answer. Rarity was starting to worry about her. The latest shipments of books from Canterlot had come with 2 royal guards posted in the basement, and Rarity hadn't liked the look of books at all. Even if Twilight found an answer there, Rarity feared the price would be too high. Rarity felt the weight of responsibility for Big Macintosh. She was determined to treat him as well as possible. She had been giving a little of her own blood each night, and the effect on his health was remarkable. He doubled his productivity on the farm, and the last time she dared to ask. He rated Applejack's attitude toward the whole mess as hot as the stove when you're done cooking. Was supposed was an improvement over marry the chicken with her feathers plucked. Unfortunately, the process was not without side effects. The strange feelings she had woken up in him with her first feeding had only intensified once he let him taste her blood, and he had begun to treat her downright affectionately, finding excuses to linger at her boutique after her evening meal, listening gradually as he talked to him about the latest styles and her struggles with design, encouraging her to lean on him as he vented her frustrations. Much as he knew these feelings were a byproduct of her own power, or perhaps more accurately, the direct result of them, with his increased health and strength a bonus. So he had to admit, it felt good to be appreciated, even if he wasn't quite the stallion of her dreams.
And looked how well that went,
she muttered, finishing a seam. Still, things were settling into a routine at last. Big Magintos's increased strength and stamina let him get his daily chores done in the morning, leaving him free to relieve Fluttershy without regret. Fluttershy was handily working at the boutique better than Rarity had dared hope, as he finally able to attend properly to design work. Lifting the dress from the sewing machine, she studied it carefully, then nodded satisfied. Careful to not wake Sweetie Belle, she moved it to a mannequin, pulling gently on the fabric with her magic just to arrange it just so, then imagined it over the customer's body. Perfect as always. She had Fluttershy let the customer know to come by tomorrow morning for the final fitting, and then there's a sharp rap at the door.
Now who could that be?
She grumbled, walking into the front of the store and opening the door, then blinking and staring. It was the most abysmally dressed stallion he had ever seen. He was wearing some sort of wide-brimmed hat, a long cloak, and leggings that covered his entire belly, all made of pressed, waterproof wool of a dismal gray hue that largely hid his blue coat and brown mane. As if that weren't bad enough, he had a large golden pendant around his neck that he found almost physically painful to look at for its gaudiness, and a broad band of was that leather around his throat. For a moment, she felt like laughing at the ridiculousness of it all.
I'm sorry, sir, but as much as you are in dire need of my services, you really should come by in the afternoon,
she said.
The stallion snored. Actually, I was just hoping you might answer a few questions for me. Would you mind looking at this?
He raised one hoof, displaying a silver medallion with an unusual design.
I'm a dressmaker, not an antique dealer,
Rarity replied, but nevertheless reached out with her magic to take the medallion.
I'm not sure what you want me to.
She couldn't get a grip on it. Her magic was just sliding off, like it had when she attempted to take Twilight Sparkle's portrait of Celestia away. She looked at the stallion, who was looking quite fiercely at her, but not quite meeting her gaze.
That's all I needed to know,
he said, crouching, bringing the other foreleg up to reveal a strange device of wood and metal attached to it. Ponies had little use for bows, but he read about them in novels of distant land, and the device resembled a bow of sorts. Furthermore, it was armed, not with an arrow, but a short, broad stake, which he was pointing directly at her. Oh, shoot, it's a crossbow! Run!
You can't be serious,
she said, voice calm despite her nerves. She reached out with her magic to disarm the contraption, only to find her power sliding off of it, her gaze drawn to the pendant. Perhaps it simply wasn't unfathomable after all.
You have terrorized this town for your last night, Fapia!
He declared, stepping forward as he began to scramble back from the door.
I'm afraid you're hardly visible, Hunt,
Betty began to babble, wondering she could talk her way out of this.
You're the only one doing any terrorizing here, and I must insist you leave my shop at once.
Don't bother to deny your true nature, Fapia!
I do wish you would stop calling me that. It sounds rather vulgar.
For what else?
He said, twisting his leg and exposing something on his underside. Some sort of pipe with tubing running up to his outfit. For some odd reason, Freddy found herself thinking of Pinkie Pie.
We'll do this!
He finished the sentence, and the stallion slapped his chest with his other foot-hoof, and a spray of clear liquid soiled the tube and hit Rarity in the face. The scream echoed throughout all of Ponyville. Rarity flung herself away from the hunter, hose beating uselessly against the floorboards as he fell to her side, legs moving too late to cover her head, but like nothing she had ever felt before. Like fire and acid and cold and knives all rolled into one concoction of hell. As the pain began to fade, She realized she could hear Sweetie Belle crying out in her bedroom.
Oh no,
She whispered, great terror to her fear for her own life rising in her heart.
oh Sweetie Belle, please don't come out, please. I don't want you to see this.
She could hear the hunter approaching, and try to will away the pain and rise to her hose. But she was too scared and too hurt to concentrate. All she could do was scramble backwards into the sewing room, the stallion relentlessly matching her pace, forcing her to retreat with his damnable holy symbol. As she backed up against the wall, she found herself staring at him as he moved stoically into place, refusing to meet her gaze. All of his attention focused on the point his stake thrower was aiming at, filled with malice for someone he didn't even know.
Time to rid the world of another monster,
he said. She blinked away tears of pain and sorrow, speaking her final words.
I only see one monster here.
He scowled, moving his forehead to another spot on his chest. Rarity fiercely looked away. Which is why she was the first to see the rope as it sealed over the monster's head.
What?
He cried as it drooped over his neck, then tightened, yanking him back. His hoof hit his chest, but his aim was spoiled, the heavy bolt sinking into the door that had just been opened behind her. Sweetie Belle screamed and slammed it.
Y'all better back off before I do some damage!
Applejack said, wrestling the stallion into the back of the main part of the shop. Glaring at her, he twisted and charged her, but she stepped aside, leaving Big Macintosh to fill the gap. Rose up on his hind legs and brought his hose down, while the hunter dodged that. He did it at the cost of giving up momentum, which gave Applejack the chance to take up the slack on her lasso. After that, it was all over but the shouting, as the two wrestled him to the ground, hog-tying him before Rarity's disbelieving eyes.
Fools! Imbeciles! Do you know what you're doing?
The hunter raved, thrusting uselessly against the ropes.
Do you know what manner of beast you harbor in your midst?
Lights were turning on now, and ponies were coming out into the streets, wondering what was the ruckus about. His attention turned to Big Macintosh. His eyes widened a little further.
Useless servants! Bow my blood! Your master cares not for you!
The kick came from not Big Mac, but from Applejack. It hit the hunter in the chin, dazing him.
You hold on there a sec!
She said, glaring at him.
I ain't let a drop of her blood anywhere near my veins!
And now I'm standing up for her.
Because she's my friend!
Because she ain't never hurt a pony in her life. Not admit it! And because if she does,
she deserves better than the likes of you!
Rarity staggered to her hooves, the pain forgotten, as the local constabulary showed up, stood, and watched as Applejack turned the raving madman over to him. Assault with a deadly weapon. Did the Kansas attempted murder as he was already dead? Nothing so serious as had ever happened in Ponyville before. They had to take him out of town just to have a trial. That really didn't matter to her, though. Nothing mattered but the sight of Applejack standing in her store, waiting only long enough to be sure the hunter was carted off safely before walking to her.
Why?
She said, her voice raw. Applejack visited a little. Oh, sucks, Rarity. You heard why? I've been awful mad at you lately, and I can't say as I'm exactly offering away myself. But no pony deserves that, at least of all you. You didn't have to try to hide what you were doing. That was worth a lot. Plus, you're my friend. I may have lost sight of that, but it's still true. Rarity blinked, feeling tears in her eyes again.
I mean, why are you here at this time of night?
Applejack looked up and then away. I was just going. It's not important now. Maybe you're lucky I got here when I did. Rarity sensed a double meaning and said nothing as Applejack started walking toward the door. Big Macintosh started walking past Applejack and headed toward her. Then Applejack paused, and Big Macintosh did too. Listen, Rarity, Applejack said, not looking back. You all drop by the house sometime. We're gonna be done with the harvesting soon, and I'll have some time to stay up and look at the stars. Maybe we could talk, about what you've been missing in town. I'll know how you like your gossip.
I like that,
Rarity said, closing her eyes.
I like that very much.
There was a moment's silence. I gotta get back to the farm. Big Mac, you get back at before the rooster, okay? Got another big day tomorrow.
Yup,
Big Macintosh replied, stepping quietly into Rarity's side, reaching up to rub the tears from her eyes.
I reckon we do.
The front door closed, then the back door opened, Rarity found herself overwhelmed by Sweetie Belle. Gasped when she saw the birds over her sister's face and neck. Forgot everything else, clutching her tight. Big McIntosh backed out to give her room, but stood close, watching over her.
I must look awful,
Rarity gasped.
You looked better.
Big McIntosh allowed. Rarity couldn't help but laugh. If he tried some corny line about her looking just the same to him, she'd known she had really enslaved the poor fellow.
Doesn't matter,
Rarity asserted him, Sweetie Belle at herself.
it's her skin.
There are more important things in life. There was a sort of awkward silence.
I wonder if Mask will be in this season,
She added. Big McIntosh and Sweetie Belle laughed, and Rarity laughed too. And then she cried tears that washed her pain away.
Well, wasn't that an interesting story? Sweet and heartwarming all the way. Oh, you just gotta love sibling moments. Much like how I love it whenever I sneak up upon my sister and bare my fangs.